Welcome to the world of science fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy the listening. Dominic Reed stared at the holographic notification floating above his desk, its soft blue glow reflecting off his untouched morning coffee. His uncle Theodore was dead. The message blinked with legal jargon about inheritance proceedings, but one detail caught his eye: the old Victorian mansion on the outskirts of New Portland. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered, running a hand through his disheveled dark hair. The quantum analysis reports on his desktop dimmed automatically, sensing his attention shift. The last time he'd seen Uncle Theodore was 15 years ago when Dominic was still a teenager. The old man had been eccentric even then, rambling about cosmic alignments and dimensional barriers while tinkering with strange devices in his workshop. The family had written him off as harmless but unstable. Now he'd left Dominic his house. The law firm's AI assistant chimed in through his neural interface. "Mr. Reed, would you like to schedule the property inspection for this afternoon? The house's systems are unusual. Manual verification is required." Dominic glanced at his work queue, another day of analyzing probability vectors for corporate clients. "Yeah, schedule it. I could use a break from this anyway." 3 hours later, his autocab wound through the preserved historical district ere modern buildings gave way to restored Victorian-era homes. The autumn rain created a constant static against the cab's dome as it pulled up to the address. The house loomed before him, a 3-story monster of weathered wood and elaborate trim work. Despite the dreary weather, something about the place seemed to glow from within, a subtle luminescence that made his eyes strain to focus. Property registration confirmed. "Welcome home, Mr. Reed," the house's AI greeted as he approached the front steps. The door swung open silently. The foyer was warm and dimly lit by what appeared to be gas lamps, though Dominic couldn't spot any actual flames. The air smelled of old books and something else, a sweet, alien scent he couldn't place. "Hello, Dominic Reed." He spun around. A woman stood at the top of the curved staircase, if she could be called just a woman. Her skin was a deep violet that seemed to shimmer in the strange light, her features striking and almost too perfect, with eyes that held an inner luminescence. She wore what appeared to be a modernized Victorian dress, form-fitting but elegant. "I am Lyra," she said, descending the stairs with fluid grace. "I serve as guardian of this house." Her voice carried an accent he couldn't place, musical and slightly archaic. "You're not human," Dominic managed, immediately feeling foolish for stating the obvious. A smile played at the corners of her mouth. How very observant. She reached the bottom of the stairs and gave a small curtsy. "Did your uncle never mention me?" "Uncle Theodore didn't mention much of anything to anyone," Dominic said. "He wasn't exactly close with the family." "Ah yes, Theodore was rather protective of his secrets." Lyra moved closer, and Dominic caught that strange sweet scent again. "But now you're here, and there's so much to discuss." Her proximity made him acutely aware of how attractive she was, despite, or perhaps because of, her alien nature. He took a step back, trying to gather his thoughts. "Look, I just came to inspect the property. I'm not sure what's going on here but dash." "Oh, but you are sure of something," Lyra interrupted, her luminescent eyes studying him intently. "You can feel it, can't you? The house, the way it bends reality around itself." Dominic wanted to deny it, but he couldn't. The interior dimensions seemed wrong somehow, spaces extending where they shouldn't. Shadows moved at the corners of his vision, and the walls themselves appeared to pulse with a subtle rhythm. "What is this place?" he asked. "What are you?" Lyra's smile widened, revealing teeth that were just a bit too sharp to be human. "Those are excellent questions, Dominic Reed. But perhaps we should start with a tour." She gestured to the surrounding house. "After all, this is your inheritance." "And she stepped closer again, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "I am part of that inheritance." Dominic followed Lyra through the house, trying to focus on her words rather than the way she moved. The tour felt like walking through an eerie painting, rooms connected in ways that defied Euclidean geometry, and staircases seemed to lead both up and down simultaneously. "The house has been in your family's possession for 7 generations, Lyra explained, leading him into what appeared to be a library, though possession might not be the correct term. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling, their spines adorned with scripts he didn't recognize. A holographic star chart hung in the center of the room, displaying constellations he'd never seen. What would be the correct term? Dominic asked, watching as Lyra traced her fingers along the spines of several ancient volumes. Partnership, perhaps. Or symbiosis. She turned to face him, leaning against a bookshelf with casual grace. "I am bound to this house by contract and tradition. Each generation of your family has served as, let's say, custodian of this arrangement." Dominic's attention was drawn to a subtle pulsing light behind the walls. "And what exactly is this arrangement?" "I maintain the house and its functions. In return." She paused, her luminescent eyes meeting his. "Well, there are certain obligations, responsibilities that must be fulfilled." Before Dominic could press for details, a deep thrumming sound reverberated through the building. The lights flickered, and for a moment, he could have sworn he saw stars through the ceiling. "The house is settling," Lyra said quickly, too quickly. "It's adjusting to your presence." Dominic moved to Uncle Theodore's study, drawn by a soft blue glow emanating from beneath the door. Inside, holographic displays covered every surface, showing complex mathematical formulae and diagrams he didn't understand. At the center of the room stood a pedestal supporting what looked like a crystal sphere, but its surface rippled like liquid. "What was my uncle working on?" he asked, reaching toward the sphere. Lyra's hand caught his wrist, her touch cool but not unpleasant. "Careful. Some things here are sensitive." She released him but stayed close. Theodore was studying what he called the Nexus Protocol. He believed he'd discovered connections between different realities. Dominic noticed a journal on the desk, its pages covered in his uncle's cramped handwriting. Random phrases jumped out: convergence points, stellar alignments, guardian bloodlines. "You're not just a housekeeper, are you?" he asked, turning to face Lyra. She smiled that enigmatic smile again. "I am many things, Dominic Reed. A keeper of secrets, a guardian of thresholds." She stepped closer, close enough that he could see faint patterns swirling beneath her violet skin. "And now, I am yours." The way she said it sent a shiver down his spine, part attraction, part warning. "I didn't ask for any of this." "Few ever do," she replied. "But here we are. The question is," her fingers traced a pattern in the air, leaving trails of soft light, "what will you do with your inheritance?" A distant chime echoed through the house, and Lyra's expression shifted. "We have visitors," she said, her tone sharpening. "Unexpected ones." Through the study window, Dominic saw a sleek black vehicle descending from the rain-dark sky. It bore no markings, but something about its design suggested authority and threat. "Who are they?" he asked. Lyra's eyes narrowed, their glow intensifying. "People who believe they have a claim to this house. And to me." She turned to him, all playfulness gone from her expression. "Now, Dominic Reed, you must decide. Will you assert your inheritance, or shall I show them in?" The question hung in the air between them as heavy footsteps approached the study door, and Dominic realized he was about to discover just how deep this rabbit hole went. The study door burst open before Dominic could answer. 2 figures entered, a man and woman in sleek graphene suits that seemed to absorb light, their neural interfaces glowing a threatening red. "Mr. Reed," the man said, his voice carrying artificial authority. "I'm Agent Harrison Black, Stellar Defense Bureau. We need to discuss your uncle's estate." He flashed a badge that shimmered with quantum authentication markers. Dominic noticed how Lyra's posture changed, subtle but predatory. She positioned herself slightly between him and the agents, her movements fluid and deliberate. The estate has been legally transferred, she said, her formal tone carrying an edge. The house recognizes its new master. Black's partner stepped forward, her hand hovering near what looked like a weapon. The Bureau has concerns about certain assets included in the transfer. Assets? Dominic asked, his mind racing through the implications. The way they looked at Lyra made his stomach turn. Your uncle was involved in matters of planetary security, Black said. This property contains sensitive technology that That belongs to the house, Lyra interrupted. Her skin began to emit a soft phosphorescent glow, and the house's temperature dropped several degrees. And the house belongs to Dominic Reed. Mr. Reed, Black said, ignoring Lyra completely, you don't understand what you've inherited. This facility House, Lyra corrected. This facility is part of a network vital to Earth's protection. We're prepared to offer generous compensation for No. The word left Dominic's mouth before he fully processed it. Something about their dismissal of Lyra, the way they talked around her like she was furniture, made him angry. This is private property. If you have concerns, take them up with my lawyers. Black's expression hardened. This isn't a negotiation, Mr. Reed. The Bureau The lights in the study flared brilliant violet. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes blazing. The house has spoken through its master. You are no longer welcome here. The agents reached for their weapons, but before they could draw, the floor beneath them seemed to ripple in a motion that defied physics. They found themselves suddenly in the foyer, the front door opening behind them. We'll be in touch, Black called out as the house ejected them. The door slammed shut with finality. Dominic stood in stunned silence for a moment before turning to Lyra. What the hell was that? What's the Stellar Defense Bureau, and how did you The house protects its own, she said simply. Then, with a hint of her earlier playfulness returning, though I believe you humans have a saying about questions and dinner. Dominic blinked. Are you asking me to dinner? I'm suggesting that explanations are best served with good food and better wine. She gestured, and a door appeared where there hadn't been one before. Warm light and enticing aromas spilled from beyond it. Your uncle kept an excellent cellar. Shall we discuss your inheritance properly? Dominic looked at the door, then at the ethereally beautiful alien who had just demonstrated impossible power, then back at the door. His old life of quantum data analysis seemed very far away. Lead the way, he said. As he followed Lyra through the door, Dominic couldn't shake the feeling that his acceptance of dinner was really an acceptance of something much larger. The house thrummed around them, almost like a purr, and in the shadows, reality itself seemed to bend. He was about to discover exactly what it meant to inherit a house that wasn't just a house, and a guardian who was far more than she appeared. Dominic woke to find his bedroom had moved again. Where yesterday it overlooked the garden, today's window revealed a vista of impossible geometric patterns stretching into infinity. He'd stopped questioning these things over the past week. Your morning coffee, sir. Lyra materialized beside his bed, offering a steaming cup. She'd taken to wearing more modern clothing today, a simple violet dress that complemented her skin tone. I trust you slept well, despite the house's adjustments. Better than I should have, considering. He accepted the coffee, careful not to stare too long at the way the light played across her features. Any sign of our friends from the Bureau? Nothing obvious. She perched on the edge of his bed with casual grace, though the house detected several scanning attempts overnight. They're growing impatient. Dominic sipped his coffee, perfect, as always. Then maybe it's time we figure out exactly what they're after. He nodded toward Uncle Theodore's study. I found something in his journals last night. The study had become their war room of sorts, walls covered in holographic displays of data they'd pieced together. Dominic pulled up his latest discovery, a series of coordinates. Look at this pattern, he said, highlighting points across a global map. Victorian houses, all built within a decade of each other, all with peculiar characteristics according to local records. Lyra's luminescent eyes narrowed. Houses like this one. Houses with guardians. Dominic watched her reaction carefully. How many of your people are there, Lyra? She stood, moving to trace the pattern of points on the map. We were called the Stellari once, before the Bureau, before the houses. We were explorers. We mapped the spaces between spaces. Her finger stopped on their location. Now we maintain their network, powering their barriers against threats they barely understand. How many? 12 houses. 12 families. Her voice carried centuries of contained anger. They caught us one by one, bound us with contracts written in quantum states and blood. Dominic pulled up another file, thermal imaging of the house's substructure. At its heart pulsed a familiar crystalline sphere, larger than the one in the study. The artifacts, that's what they're really protecting, isn't it? Smart boy. Lyra's smile carried equal parts pride and predation. The artifacts channel our energy, create a web between the houses. The Bureau claims it shields Earth from cosmic horrors. She laughed softly. They never considered we might be the horror they feared. A distant alarm chimed through the house. Dominic checked the security feed and cursed. 3 black vehicles had breached the property's outer perimeter. Agent Black stepped from the first, flanked by heavily armed operatives. Time for another breakfast meeting? Lyra said, her skin beginning to glow with suppressed power. Wait. Dominic grabbed her arm, surprised as always by how solid she felt despite her ethereal appearance. Maybe we should hear them out. If the artifacts really are protecting Earth dash. They protect their power over us, she snapped, then softened. But you're right. Knowledge before action. She pressed something into his hand, a small crystal that hummed against his palm. Keep this close. Trust nothing they say without confirming it through the house's systems. The front door chimed. Dominic took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and headed downstairs to face the Bureau. Lyra followed like a deadly shadow in violet silk, her usual playful demeanor replaced by something far more dangerous. Time to learn exactly what his inheritance had gotten him into. Black stood in the foyer, his stance military rigid. 2 operatives flanked him, their augmented armor humming with contained energy. Mr. Reed, he said, we need to talk about the artifacts. Or about how your organization enslaved an alien species. Dominic kept his voice level, conscious of Lyra's presence behind him. Black's expression tightened. So she's told you her version. Did she mention what happened to Shanghai when its artifact failed? Or the Jakarta incident? I've told him nothing but truth, Lyra said, unlike your Bureau. Show him. Black gestured, and one of his operatives projected a hologram into the foyer space. The image showed a city, Shanghai, presumably, but something was wrong with the sky above it. Reality itself seemed to tear, revealing things that hurt Dominic's eyes to look at. Tentacles of pure geometry writhed through the breach, and wherever they touched. Enough. Lyra said sharply. The hologram flickered out. That was 3 years ago, Black said. The local guardian had sabotaged her artifact. 17 million people died before we could stabilize the breach. He turned to Dominic. The network isn't about control, Mr. Reed. It's about survival. The crystal in Dominic's pocket hummed. He squeezed it, and data flooded his mind through the house's systems. You're lying. The Shanghai incident was contained before any casualties. The breach was natural, the Guardian sacrificed herself to seal it. Black's facade cracked slightly. How did you dash? The house knows, Lyra said, her voice carrying a hint of triumph. It remembers everything the Bureau tries to hide. Then it should remember why we need the network, Black countered. The universe is hostile, Mr. Reed. The barriers between dimensions are weakening. Without the artifacts, without the Guardian's power dash. You mean without our enslavement, Lyra interrupted, her skin pulsing with inner light. Tell him the rest, Black. Tell him about the experiments, the breeding programs, the failed attempts to replicate our power. Dominic felt sick. The crystal was feeding him images now, laboratories, failed hybrids, decades of systematic exploitation. Jesus Christ. We did what was necessary, Black said. Earth needed protection. The Guardians provided it. A fair exchange dash. Fair. Lyra laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You trapped us in these houses, bound our children to your service, treated us like batteries for your machines. Her eyes blazed. Show him what you did to the ones who refused, Black. Show him how you made us comply. The crystal burned in Dominic's hand, more images flooding his mind, darker ones. He staggered, and Lyra caught him. That's enough, she said softly, taking the crystal. To Black, he's seen what you are. Now leave. This isn't over, Black warned. The artifacts must be protected. If you interfere he let the threat hang. Get out, Dominic managed through clenched teeth, before I let her show you exactly how much power these houses really contain. The Bureau agents withdrew, but Dominic knew this was just the beginning. He turned to Lyra, seeing her in a new light, not just beautiful and mysterious, but a survivor of centuries of abuse. Why didn't you tell me everything from the start? She touched his cheek, her fingers cool against his skin. Would you have believed me? Humans prefer comfortable lies to uncomfortable truths. Her expression softened. But you're different. You question. You see. I see that we need to do something about this. He gestured to encompass the house, the artifact, everything. But Black wasn't entirely wrong about the barriers, was he? Something is out there. Yes, Lyra admitted, but we Stellari faced such things long before humans built their first cities. We don't need to be slaves to be guardians. She stepped closer, her presence intoxicating. Help me free my people, Dominic. Help me show Earth a better way. Dominic looked into her luminescent eyes and saw both truth and secrets there. She was offering him a chance to right a historical wrong, but he couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't telling him everything. The house thrummed around them, its walls pulsing with untapped power.